back to AP Macroeconomics with your favorite teacher, me, Mr. Fritz. Today we're going to learn about the loanable funds market. Today we're talking about the loanable funds market. The loanable funds market is just like a regular old supply and demand graph, except now, instead of the supply and demand of cookies or hamburgers or cake, it's the supply and demand of money that is and can be lent out. So instead of the quantity of hamburgers or something, it's the quantity of loanable funds, and instead of price, it's the price of borrowing money, which is going to be the real interest rate. And we're going to label that a capital I because we use a lowercase I for the nominal interest rate. So when you're looking at this graph, I want you to think of two different things. The demand is going to come from borrowers. Anything that causes people, businesses, or the government to borrow more money causes the demand for loanable funds to increase. Anything that causes all those groups to demand less money will have the demand for loanable funds decrease and shift to the left. The supply of loanable funds, however, is going to come from savers and lenders. So if people, businesses, or the government are saving more money, then there's going to be an increase in supply of loanable funds and make it cheaper to borrow. But if for some reason we're taking money out of the bank or foreign investors are pulling their money out of the country, that's going to lead to a decrease in the supply of loanable funds. The first thing that's going to affect the demand of loanable funds is going to be demand for borrowing money by people and businesses to conduct interest-sensitive spending. For businesses, it's going to be interest-sensitive investment spending. When businesses are buying capital goods like machines or factory equipment or like a fleet of cars. For consumers, it's mainly going to be like a new car, maybe a house. The demand of loanable funds is also affected by government borrowing. If the government goes into a budget deficit, that means the taxes are going to be lower than the government spending. They're going to be deficit spending. In order to get that money, they're going to have to act just like anybody else. They're going to have to borrow the money. They come into the loanable funds market, demand for loanable funds increases, and it drives up the real interest rate. The first two things that's going to cause a change in the supply of loanable funds is going to be business or consumer savings. Household savings, like me or you saving money in the bank, if that increases, that's going to increase the supply of loanable funds. And if it decreases, it's going to decrease the supply of loanable funds, cause it to shift to the left and drive up the real interest rate. The government affects the supply of loanable funds as well when they are in a budget surplus. If taxes are greater than government spending, then we're going to end up with a budget surplus. The government will have extra money that they can use to either pay off government debt or save it in the bank or lend it out even. That increases the supply of loanable funds, drives down the real interest rate, and makes it cheaper to borrow. The supply of loanable funds is also going to be affected by financial capital flows. Financial capital inflow is when foreigners bring their money into a country, and it increases the supply of loanable funds and drives down the real interest rate. Financial capital outflow is when foreign investors take their money out of a country. That decreases the supply of loanable funds and drives up the real interest rate. Generally, financial capital is going to be following the highest real interest rate. So when the interest rate in a country is higher than other countries, then foreigners are going to bring their money and put it into our banks or into our financial instruments like bonds. Remember, when you put your money in a savings account or a bank or put it into a bond, you're the one that gets paid interest. And so people are going to want to put their money in the place with the highest real interest rate because that gives them the highest rate of return. So when our interest rates are up compared to other countries, foreigners are going to bring their money, put it in our banks, and drive that real interest rate back down. However, if, like the United Kingdom's real interest rate is now higher than the US, then people in our country are going to take their money out and take it over to the United Kingdom so that they can get that higher rate of return. This is also going to be affected by political instability. If foreign investors think that this is a unsafe investment right now in this country, like maybe they're concerned about a revolution or something like that, they'll take their money out of the country and it'll drive up the real interest rate in the country. Let's do an example real quick. Let's say in this country that they now have a higher real interest rate than other countries around the world. Foreign investors are going to want to bring their money over to this country, causing financial capital inflow, increasing the supply of loanable funds, and driving down the real interest rate. It'll now be cheaper to borrow money in this country, which will lead to businesses increasing their investment spending. They're going to be increasing interest-sensitive investment spending on capital goods. That's going to be great for this country because A, it will increase aggregate demand for now, and then in the long run, there'll be more capital goods available to increase our economic growth. So that's been the loanable funds market. In the next video, we're going to talk about crowding out.